If you've ever traveled on a V-Line regional train before, you've probably seen this, the V-Line Combined Train and Coach Map. This is one of three main public transport diagrams created by PTV, the others being a map of all train routes, and finally a map of tram routes. Both of these maps are actually pretty good. They present the information really well and make it easy to tell which journeys you can make for the most part. The V-Line train and coach map, on the other hand, is a very different story. This is one of the most confusing and unintuitive transit maps I've ever seen, and in this video I'll be discussing why, and also why a map like this just isn't really feasible. The first and most obvious issue with this map is the coloring. While the other transit maps use a wide variety of colors to differentiate lines, the train and coach map uses just two, one for trains and one for coaches. For the trains, this works relatively fine, as the rail network operates radially, with every line branching out from a central point at Melbourne's Southern Cross. Interchanges between suburban trains are shown with this little blue symbol next to the station name, which is honestly a fine way to do this. Berwick Station also has this symbol next to it, which says, Limited service at Berwick Station. This is because there is only one daily service that stops here, but I find it weird that this same indicator isn't present at other stations like Essendon, which also have incredibly limited service, only a few trains during the morning peak. Trains that require paper tickets have a dashed line on the map, which is the same thing they do on the Victorian Train Network map, a map that also shows all of the V-Line train routes, and honestly does it a lot better. Of course, this map doesn't show coaches, so it ultimately has a different purpose to the combined train and coach map, but I would still argue this map is much more useful for the majority of V-Line passengers, most of which don't use connecting coach services. Moving on to the coach map, and by far the biggest issue I have with this diagram as a whole. There are 47, I think, coach routes. Actually, a quick update. I got that number wrong. There's actually 81. Yes, 81 different coach routes. Anyway, you'd be surprised how difficult it is to find an actual number, as most places group the trains and coaches together, and many of them take similar routes. Anyway, there's 81 different coaches, and all have the same color, with absolutely zero way to distinguish which one is which, making it practically impossible to tell which coaches go where. Like, it looks like you can take a coach from Barmer to Benalla, but you can't. It looks like the coaches from Canberra end at Can River, but actually they go all the way to Bairnsdale. And there are some coach routes that just don't even work on this map at all, like the coach from Warrnambool to Koroit to Port Fairy, then out to Mount Gambier, which is a well-patronized route that I have been on and makes complete sense in real life. It just looks like this on the coach map. There are also tons of stops that are completely missing in places like Bannockburn and Tattara, many of which have plenty of space to actually fit on the map. I can definitely understand why they skip some smaller stops at tiny towns, but there's just so many missed places. The only indication of this is a tiny "not all stops shown" disclaimer in the corner. Overall, my stance is that you should never show just part of the information. If you're able to, show all of it, and if not, then don't show it. And at the very least, it should be way more clear what information you're leaving out. Maybe there could be a rule where only stops in towns over a population of 500 are shown. That would still not be great, but it would at least be more consistent. Also, whenever there's an interchange between trains and coaches, there will usually be an interchange symbol, but sometimes they will use a different symbol, which is supposed to mean an indirect interchange. But here at Springhurst, the coach stop is right next to the station, and it still gets the other symbol. That sounds pretty direct to me. Finally, I should also add that V-Line does have other versions of these maps that are instead localized by which part of the state you're in. These are still not great, but at least from what I can tell, they show all the stops, even though they still have pretty much every other problem the main map has. Also, the northern one. Oh my god. Although I haven't ever seen one of these in person, and I only know about them through the V-Line website. Another thing I want to point out is that coaches are just really confusing in general. They don't have route numbers, so instead the only identifier is the description of the route, such as the concisely named Mildura to Melbourne via Donald, Maryborough and Ballarat line, which is different to the Mildura to Melbourne via Swan Hill and Bendigo line, and just the Mildura to Ballarat line. And what do you mean there's a coach called Mount Gambier to Melbourne via Geelong or Ballarat? Like, what? Do you not know? Does the driver just decide based on vibes? In all seriousness, these are two completely different coach routes, and stuff like this is actually quite common. The Geelong one involves changing to a train at Warrnambool, while the other one involves taking the coach all the way to Ballarat and then changing. So maybe there are more than 81 different coach routes if you count all of these ones? Also, why is this considered a route when you have to change to a train? Surely the route should be Mount Gambier to Warrnambool and Mount Gambier to Ballarat, right? Right? Overall, I think it's clear that the V-Line coach network needs a complete rework. Firstly, we need to reorganize these routes. V-Line coaches should get their own numbering system, like regular buses, but maybe put the letter V at the start to differentiate them. More frequent V-Line routes could get lower numbers in the single and double digits, while less frequent routes could get numbers in the hundreds. As for what to do with the map, I think it's pretty clear that trying to show every coach route here is impossible to do properly. Showing every single stop is just completely infeasible unless you want the map to be like way too big. And the service patterns are just too confusing to properly communicate to someone on one diagram. This map honestly does more harm than good. I would remove the coaches from the map and instead include maps at V-Line stations themselves that show the coach routes that depart from that station. While this probably wouldn't be too much help to passengers planning journeys, it could be useful for people to confirm they're interchanging onto the correct coach. But for now, I guess we just have to stick with this. With that said, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.